How you doing, people? Welcome back to another ESO video. Today is a brand new video and we're going to go into a massive deep dive regarding the Templar class. Everything you need to know: skills, morphs, passives, ultimates, the do's and the don'ts, the hows and the whys, and everything is hopefully going to make sense to you by the end of the video. Speaking of which, if you go to the end of the video, you will be presented with some class identity based sets that may help you in your journey towards making your new character. Now, if you liked the video, obviously give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, hit that button. It is free. Now we're going to get into the details. Okay, so basically the Templar wields light and magic and fire and stuff. So where do you really start? Well, we're going to go into the skills first of all, obviously. We're going to start off with the 3 individual skill lines that basically every class has, and they're all different, obviously, but they all have their own unique 3 skill lines. Now, the trick to this obviously is leveling them up. Now, if you don't know how to do this already, I'm going to explain very briefly. Each one of these skills is unlocked at a set level. So as you progress through this particular skill line, you will unlock skills afterwards. But in order to gain experience points for this skill line, you have to slot a skill. So if you were to buy this particular skill, for example, and you put it on your bar, doesn't matter what the skill is, this now levels up the Aedric Spear skill line if you get experience points while on this bar. If you're using 1 bar, that's easy. If you're using 2 bars, make sure you're on the right bar when you gain XP. And the same can be said for these 2 skill lines as well. All you need to do is slot 1 skill from each skill line, and while gaining XP, as long as they're on your bar, evenly you will spread the experience points to each of the skill lines and gradually unlock the other skills. So first and foremost, that is the most important thing to consider. You must have a skill from the skill line on your bar in order for you to gain XP to progress it. All skill levels go up to 50, and of course the ultimates open at level 12. The first skill line is the Aedric Spear skill line, and this is basically spears and stabs and jabs. We call them jabs. Now, your first skill is Puncturing Strikes. This actually has 2 different morphs, but we'll go over the basic version first. So this will do damage to the target in front of you, and surrounding enemies outside of the one target that you're aiming at will also take damage, but they'll take less. Each strike reduces their movement speed, so they're actually snared for 0.5 seconds per hit. Now, this is a channel, which is 0.8 seconds, and it'll hit for multiple times during that channel. The main target up front will get hit the most, the rest will get kind of splash damage. Wrong skill. There we go. And what you really need to do there is just weave your light attacks in between each skill. Now, you make that a little quicker, that'll be a bit more fluid, but we'll go over that in another video. If you look at the link there, that will show you how to light weave and heavy weave effectively. Now, the morphs are quite simple, although they are very different from each other. This starts off costing Magicka, and as you can see, it's an 8 by 6 meter radius, so it goes in front and spreads across. It's not a cone, it's kind of like a rectangle. Now, the other variant is Biting Jabs. This now costs stamina, but it comes with a buff. If you activate it, you get Major Brutality for 10 seconds, which increases your Brutality and Sorcery. So Major Sorcery and Major Brutality give you weapon damage and spell damage increases. Now, before that gets confusing, I know you've got 2 major buffs there. 2 major buffs that are different to each other can stack. 2 that are the same cannot. So that's a bonus nonetheless. That saves you using a brutality pot, basically. At the same time, your single target DPS is relatively the same, although it does physical damage now instead of magic, but your area of effect has now been improved, so you actually do more damage to surrounding targets than you usually would. So overall, this costs stamina now, and it does more damage, and it gives you a buff. Bear in mind, you can find that buff in other potions and such, or from your group, but you've got it with you nonetheless. The other morph is Puncturing Sweeps. So this is jabs, this is sweeps. This one does the same damage as the basic version in both single target and area of effect, so no bonus to damage there, but you heal for a percentage of the damage done. 33% of all damage done by this ability will heal you. And no, that's not just single target, that's multiple targets. So the visuals look relatively similar, but wrong skill. This now heals you. Now, if you look at the side there where the green numbers are, those are heals for hitting stuff. So that's your survival morph. Again, cost is important because while it's relatively cheap, it does differ depending on the morph. One is Magicka, one is stamina. So you need to figure out which one you're going to choose and which benefit you want to gain from. Piercing Javelin is quite simple. This is a spear that you throw at the enemy and it knocks them down. does magic damage, and knocks them back by 8 meters. This ability also ignores resistances and cannot be blocked, so this is a guaranteed knockdown. It's quite nasty. Won't knock down a target dummy because they are CC immune, but if that was a player or an enemy that isn't CC immune, that would knock them on their ass. Now, the morphs for this, 2 completely different ones. Again, 1 magic, 1 stamina. The magic version deals additional damage based on the distance the spear travels. Now, the maximum range for this is 22 meters. So if you hit it at maximum range, you'll do more damage. Also, to add to this, so you can calculate it up, basically 2% damage for every 1 meter you're away from the target, up to a maximum of 40. So they don't consider the full 22 meters, but that is as far as you can go. If you go 20 meters, you're pretty much done. The other version, you hurl a spear at the enemy with godlike strength. It does physical damage now, basically. We don't need to read the whole description. It changes. Physical damage instead of magic. And it's a stamina ability, and it stuns them for longer instead of knocking them back. So instead of having a duration of knockback, it has a duration of stun. So 4 whole seconds stunning them in place. So you've got 2 options here. One, the further away, the more damage, and it costs magicka. The other one, full-on stun on single target. Generally speaking, most people tend to use that in PvP, but it's entirely up to you. You can actually use that as a single target spammable, but it is bloody expensive, so be careful. Now, the next skill is Focused Charge. This is a jump ability, or gap closer, basically. As you can see here, you launch at the target, and you hit him in the face. This has a 22-meter range, so you can launch from quite far away. But it has 2 different morphs. So the original variant of it, basically it does damage, and it's magic damage specifically. You gain major protection for 4 seconds, reducing the damage you take by 10%. If the enemy hit is casting, they are interrupted and set off balance. So this is your long-range interrupt and a mitigation bonus at the same time. Very, very powerful. Now, these 2 are slightly different. They both cost magicka, but this one deals increased damage and interrupts all enemies near the point of impact and increases the duration of major protection. So you're very, very tanky when you land, and you can hit all the targets in area of effect. Also, the same rule applies. You can interrupt them and you will knock them off balance. Bear in mind, the radius of this is 6 meters. Now, the other one is Toppling Charge. It always stuns the enemy and sets them off balance regardless of whether they are casting or not. So this is a guaranteed off-balance bonus. You just have to jump at the target and that is it. But this is single target. This is area of effect, this is single target. So if you want the area of effect one, you need explosive. If you want the single target one, you want toppling. As you can see, hits them all. Quite nasty, big uptime on your major protection, which as you can see here in the character sheet is right there. Minor and major stack. Now, next is Spear Shards. This is actually very, very important, not just for DPS, but also for resource management for your group. So, you throw a spear on the ground up to 28 meters away in a 6-meter radius. It does magic damage every 1 second, and it hits with initial damage for everyone caught inside of it. However, an ally near the spear can pick up the spear. It doesn't take it away from the ground, don't worry, it's just a magical buff that they take. It's a synergy. And it restores 3, 9, 6, 0 magicka or stamina, depending on which one of their skills is highest, or which one of their bars is highest. Big circle, drop it on the enemies. Does damage every 1 second, and an initial hit when it lands. Now, the morphs are quite simple, although the tooltip is a little bit off. The synergy grants both magicka and stamina, instead of whichever is lowest. Now, that is not actually correct. It's not whichever's lowest. It is whichever one is highest. So your highest resource pool is the one that will benefit from the spear generally. But ignore the misword. This will give you both anyway. So that's handy. Both resources. But the damage is exactly the same. Now the other variant, the damage is increased. So for the purpose of extra damage for you, this version is better. But what this does is it still has the regular bonus where whichever resource bar is highest from the person that picks it up, that will be filled, or that will be given almost 4k. So if you are in a group with a stamina build or a magic build specifically, or just someone that's got a high stamina bar or a high magic bar, it will consider the highest one. This morph and the basic one are the same for that. This one, however, gives you both. So if you're a healer, you probably want to take advantage of this so people can just fill all their bars nice and easy. If you're a DPS, you probably want to take advantage of this. Yes, they can still take the synergy, but of course, it does help you do more damage. They are fired exactly the same, so we don't need to go over that again. Sun Shield. This one gives you kind of a damage shield. Basically, it grants you a damage shield that absorbs damage over 6 seconds, but obviously if you get hit for more than that amount of damage, it's gone. And this proportion of damage shield actually scales off of your max health. So the higher your health, the larger the shield. And this can get very, very dramatic. Now, nearby enemies take magic damage when the shield is activated, and each enemy hit increases the shield's strength. So basically, all you need to do is activate it. Enemies are hit for the activation, and you have a bigger damage shield the more targets you hit. Now, the morphs of this are quite different. Radiant Ward has reduced cost, and the shield is strengthened further for each enemy hit, so a larger damage shield. Nearby enemies take magic damage, and the shield is activated. Each enemy hit increases the strength by 20%. So that is quite dramatic. That makes it very, very powerful in comparison to the base version. Still applied the same, but stronger. This, however, no longer deals damage on activation. Instead, it deals damage when the shield expires based on the amount of damage it absorbs, and increases the radius. So the radius is now 8 meters instead of 5, but for taking damage, you kind of burst at the end of it. So instead of activate, bang, have a shield, it's activate, have a shield, bang at the end. And when the shield explodes outward, it will deal 30% of the damage it has absorbed. This version, you hit the enemies initially. This one, they are hit for hitting you. Technically speaking, you could get a bigger damage shield and do more damage from this one, and it's a lot easier to activate. But this one is quite fun as a bit of a surprise if someone's weighing into you and then all of a sudden they get hit. The Dawn's Wrath skill line. Sunfire, first of all. This is your damage over time ability, and it does fire damage. It's very, very long durated. It's 22 seconds if you have your passives intact, but it doesn't ramp up. So the initial hit obviously does damage, and all the damage throughout the damage over time is consistent every single tick. So if you do overlap it, it's not the end of the world, but you're supposed to let it run out realistically. Now, upon activation, you also gain Major Savagery and Major Prophecy for 22 seconds. So that means if you have the stamina version of the jabs, you actually have Major Brutality and Sorcery all the time. And if you have this, you have Major Savagery and Prophecy all the time, which is a crit bonus. So you don't need potions at all if you use those two skills combined, which is quite handy because it opens up the opportunity for tripods, even on a 2-bar build. But this is simple. You fire this at an individual target, and they are set on fire. Yes, that can apply the bonus status effect. We'll do that in another video. Individuals all have damage over time on them. Nice and simple. Now, the morphs are slightly different. Vampire's Bane dramatically increases the strength of this damage over time ability by basically giving you a longer duration. So upon activation, you still get the same buffs and bonuses, but the damage is going to be more consistent because you don't have to keep firing it. Technically speaking, yes, of course, if you could sustain it, you could just overlap the base morph anyway, but why when you don't need to? This one, however, doesn't increase the duration, so you will have to reapply it and watch your sustainability, but this now hits multiple targets. So this splits a projectile, allowing it to affect 2 additional enemies and briefly snares them. So this one, more damage because you got a longer duration. Technically speaking, again, if you overlap it, it's the same, but this one, multiples. So we'll just demonstrate that. As you can see, it will hit 3 targets. And it's not completely smart. It won't always go to different targets. You have to kind of manually do that. It will go to the closest one. So if I hit this one, these 2 are the closest. That was a surprise. You weren't supposed to see that. Anyway, Solar Flare. Simple skill. Activate it, and you are granted Empower for 7 seconds, which increases the damage of your heavy attacks by 70%. If you're utilizing heavy attacks, that will help a lot. But essentially, you make a fireball come out of yourself, and it increases your damage done with class abilities for 5 seconds after you've activated it. Pew! See? Happy days. Nice and easy. You now have increased damage for all class abilities on that target. But it's only a 5-second bonus. So, insta-hit with a 5-second bonus afterwards. Now, the morphs of this skill are slightly different to each other. In fact, they're very different. This version, Dark Flare, does exactly the same animation as the previous. It fires a fireball up into the air like a mortar, lands on the target's head, and happy days you do damage. But the cost is down, and it also applies Major Defile within an 8-meter radius to all surrounding targets. Technically speaking, it's 6, but it's surrounding targets regardless. Their healing received and health recovery is down by 16% for 6 seconds. This is nasty in PvP, especially in a big crowd. But you can use it as a single target spam ball if you prefer. Constant in power is quite helpful. The other variant doesn't even cast like that anymore. Now, this particular version is very different. This will actually put an area of effect burst around you every 2 seconds. It's kind of a damage over time and area of effect. And it will do magic damage per target. But for activating it, all class abilities done to everything that you hit will be improved. So previously it was only for 5 seconds after casting. This is now 22. And this is what it looks like. It is different. Every 2 seconds, you do damage, and all of your skills do more if they are Templar abilities. That one is insane, but obviously it's close quarter. The actual buff you get for all your class abilities is for all abilities, regardless of their range, but obviously if you want to do damage with this, you need to be close. Backlash is quite simple. Brings a light down, puts it on the target's head, initially does damage, and at the end, does damage again. So that lasts 6 seconds, but basically, after it ends, it does damage, but damage to the enemy is increased based on the amount of damage you deal to it over the duration, up to 200%. So if you are hitting that target while this ability is on it, eventually it will calculate how much damage you've done, and then the pop at the end is boosted by that. Now, the morphs for this, one of them costs Magicka. Starts off costing Magicka, by the way. One of them costs Magicka, and it will drop a heal on the ground after it explodes. So it will still go on the target and do damage. It will still rack up damage that you do to it, and it will still pop at the end. But once it finishes, it will actually leave a 10-second heal over time on the ground, around the target. Technically speaking, you can apply it and reapply it, because you can only put this on one target at a time, to activate that pop, because it has now finished, technically. The other variant converts it to a stamina version, and it applies Minor Breach instead of giving it a heal. So you've got Minor Breach in your group already, which is a 2974 armor penetration debuff. Then, of course, you don't need this, but you can take advantage of it for the damage. But if you want to take advantage of the heal, this is how you can make it work. So again, on the target, do damage to the target. After 6 seconds, it will go bang. But if you reapply it, you've finished the previous one. So the new one starts. You can't overlap it and constantly get the pop damage. You need to let it finish, but if you need an emergency heal, you can fire it and then fire it again, and now you've got a heal on the ground. And the same, we'll do the same over here. No heals on me, reactivate it, heals on the ground. So that's a tactical way around that particular skill, but generally speaking, fire it, shoot loads of damage at the target, and then forget it, and when it goes bang, reapply again. Now, Eclipse is a little weird. So basically, you attach this to a target over 6 seconds, and when they do direct attacks, they will escalate how negatively this impacts them. So if they use a direct attack, the first time they do it, it will reduce their movement speed by 30%. If they do another one, that will then immobilize them for 3 seconds. And if they do a third one, then they will be stunned. And this can happen or activate once a second. So if they're trying to hit you over and over and over, they gradually get slower and slower to a point where they can't move. So this is quite nasty if you're trying to slow someone down who's just being really, really aggressive. Now, the other morphs for this are completely different to each other. So this one deals damage to an attacker and anyone near them when they trigger any of the effects. So same applies as before. You activate it to the target. It has the movement speed debuff, then does damage and area of effect. It has the immobilization, then damage and area of effect. Then it has a stun and a big damage and area of effect as well. So you can only put this on one target, but that target is now effectively a bomb every time it tries to do something to you. So that would encourage anyone covered in this particular debuff to stop firing at you, because otherwise they're going to kill people. And it looks like this. You can see they are dark and splodgy. Anything they do will cause negative effects. Now, the other variant is not even remotely close to that. This one is completely different. Now, you have a 12-second bonus on you, and when you take damage, their movement speed is reduced, and you heal. So as you can see here, we've actually got a shield on us. Every time you take damage, you heal. And they slow down. Very, very good for kind of controlling the room if you've got loads and loads of enemies around you, especially if you're being a tank. And you can heal from this every half a second. So rapid successions of attacks can actually really benefit you. So if they're long drawn out attacks, like one every 3 or 4 seconds, it's not going to be massive for you. But if you've got loads of people beating on you at once, you can heal really quick. So one is to basically turn one target into a bomb, and the other one is to keep you alive. Radiant Destruction. This is your Jesus beam. Everyone calls it a Jesus beam. If you don't call it a Jesus beam, now you do. This is your execute. It channels for 1.8 seconds and it will tick repeatedly during that time, doing damage to the target. Big tip for this, listen carefully, it's an execute. Don't use this at the beginning of the fight because this gets stronger the lower the health. From 50% and under, this will get stronger and it will go up to 480% more than its initial damage type. So it can get very, very dramatic. The 2 morphs for this are slightly different. Radiant Oppression deals more bonus damage. So instead of doing 480% more damage, it does 500% more damage. So a small increase there. Bear in mind that 50% health threshold doesn't mean start using it at 50%. Can you? Of course you can, but don't. If you want to take advantage of the sweet spot for this on single targets, which may be bosses or individual ads, small stuff, whatever, then you want to do this around 40%. Generally speaking, most people's generalized rotations tend to hit a certain peak. So does the Jesus beam. The Jesus beam at 50% is probably going to be lower than your average DPS of the rest of your rotation. But once you get to about 40% of the target, that's when the Jesus beam ticks start going over the damage that you were generally doing, and that's when it starts to ramp up. So about 40% and under is when you really want to start using it. 50% or whatever, just keep an eye on it and be ready. Anyway, this version is slightly stronger. This version is exactly the same damage, but you heal for a percentage of the damage inflicted. And, get this is buffed by the way, you restore magicka based on their missing health. So the lower the health of the target, the more damage you do, and you can restore up to 480 magicka per tick based on their missing health, and heal for 17% of the damage inflicted. And if you did 100k Jesus beam, which is more than achievable, you will actually heal yourself for almost 20k a tick, which is bonkers. It's very hard to die, so I normally recommend this one, but it's entirely up to you. Depends on your build, depends on how you want to set yourself up, but that's the difference between them. Now, Restoring Light is basically your healing skill line. Rush Ceremony is quite simple. It is a single target heal. Bear in mind, it's a conal effect. Well, it's a single target, but it's in a cone direction. You can't see the actual telegraph itself, but if I aim here and fire, I'm going to get someone in front of me who has low health or myself. If I expect to heal someone behind me, I need to be looking at them, otherwise it's not going to work. Now, the 2 morphs for this are quite simple. They're not dramatically different, but this one will actually heal, obviously, the target that you try to heal, but if they're lower health, you will get back some resources. And this one here gives you the opportunity to heal an extra person. So technically speaking, it will heal you and one other, or 2 people. It's an emergency heal. It's not ideal for all situations because it is limited to 2 targets, but one will be healed more than the other. At least they both get a heal. And again, it looks pretty much exactly the same, but bear in mind the cone kind of angle that you have to be looking at. If you are trying to heal someone behind you, you have to be facing them. One which is very overlooked in my opinion and is actually on the cleric build. So if you check the description, there's a video for that. If not, look at the link at the top. This is an area of effect heal with an insta-cast, and it will heal equally all allies, including you. This is your big heal. This one here, insta-cast. Insta-cast. Costs loads and loads of magics, be careful with it, but that will heal your whole bloody group. Now, the morphs for this are quite straightforward, although one is kind of a little bit different to the other. You heal a single ally outside of the radius. So if someone's running around like a lunatic, you will heal them. Also, the other variant, healed allies gain major expedition for a short duration and reduces the cost as it ranks up. So this one is actually more beneficial to your resource management, and it gives people agility because it makes them run fast. This one, same cost, same heal, but allows that kind of forgiveness for that one idiot at the back of the room that keeps running around in circles. So they are still applied the same, but very different bonuses. As you can see, activate, now I run really fast, yay. Restoring Aura, 2 completely different skills again after we morph it. This one, while slotted, gives you minor endurance, minor fortitude, and minor intellect. But activating it will give it to your group as well. So while it is on our bar, on any bar, doesn't matter which one it's on, front or back, we will constantly get that bonus. As you can see now, I've got more buffs at the bottom there. And if I go to my character sheet, endurance, intellect, and fortitude. Now, the two morphs for this are quite simple. One of them increases the radius and the duration. So it gives a buff to your group. It has the bonus for you, just like it did before, but it's 28-meter radius and 60 seconds. Now, the other version is completely different. This is repentance. This does not give the group a bonus. It still gives you the bonus, but it gives you something very, very different instead. It actually no longer applies the buffs, but now consumes corpses. If there are bodies on the ground, friendly or unfriendly, they will glow. And up to 6 of them can be consumed at a time. So if there's 12, yes, you can press it twice. It will give you back 3,000 health and 3,000 stamina for every single body on the ground that can reach within a 12-meter radius. And here's the really awesome thing. That's 3,000 each, remember? The 3,000 stamina always goes to you per target. The 3,000 health always goes to you per target and to the group. Yes, you heal the group. Next up is, of course, Cleansing Ritual. This is a ground-based area of effect, and people can take a healing synergy from it at the same time as purifying multiple effects. Now, this does actually cleanse 2 harmful effects, and for you for casting it in the first place, and it heals people around you. Every 2 seconds, they'll get a heal, they get to take a synergy, and basically that's the bread and butter of the skill. It's an area of effect, heal, and purge. It's quite expensive, so be careful. You don't want to overlap it too much. It lasts 20 seconds anyway, so it's quite long. Now, the 2 morphs are very simple. One extends the duration. So you've also got an extra bonus from it, which removes 5 harmful effects, not 2. So this is a much more potent version of the 2. Make sure if you're in a group with a Templar and you see this come up, you take the synergy. You can use it tactically, of course, if you really want to, depending on the mechanics, but generally speaking, it's a big heal and a cleanse. The other variant still has the heal and the cleanse from the synergy, and it does still cleanse you for activating it, but it no longer heals the group per second. Instead, it does damage per tick. So every 2 seconds over a 20-second period, it will do damage every 2, and it will escalate. Every 2 seconds, it will get 12% stronger up to its peak, and then it will run out. Do not overlap this unless you need a new cleanse, because this is much stronger left to its own devices. And it basically just looks like this. Big circle on the ground, anything inside of that will get damaged, and any friendlies inside of it will actually take a synergy and heal from it. And as you can see, easy damage every 2 seconds. It's quite large. Now finally, rune focus. This is quite simple. Goes on the ground, makes a rune. Happy days. And it will heal you while you're inside of it. Not just inside of it. This will increase your physical and spell resistance, giving you major resolve. So 5, 9, 4, 8. That does not stack with other types of major resolve, so bring it yourself if you need it. But while it is active, you will heal once a second, scaled off of your maximum health. So the higher your health, the stronger the heal. And while I said standing in it, if you stay inside of it, the heal is increased by up to 200%. If you stay out of it, then it stays passively as it comes. It doesn't get any benefits. Now, the 2 morphs are slightly different. The Magicka version increases the duration and increases your recovery. It basically gives you magic over the duration. So you will actually get back 2 for 2 magic every 1 second, as long as this is active. So that's really good for your mag recovery and your health recovery. Standing in the rune, remember, gives you a bigger heal. The stamina morph basically does the same, but instead of getting magicka back, you get stamina back. Technically speaking, the heal is actually stronger as well. So it's up to you which one you take, but one stronger heal and stamina, the other one magic back. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the passives, and this will start making a bit more sense, hopefully, because these are very, very important, and sometimes more important than your actives. First of all, Piercing Spear. With an Aedric Spear ability slotted, you will do 10% more critical damage, and you can go through 10% of blocking if someone is trying to block your damage, especially in PvP. There are some PvE targets that do block, but they're rare. Now, this is very simple. Any of these skills, one of them being on your bar is more than enough, but it says on your bar. So if you have 2 bars, You want it on both in order to take advantage of the passive, because otherwise if you swap, you'll lose it. So generally speaking, one skill on the front, one skill on the back, job done. It doesn't matter which ones they are. You can double bar one, or you can have two separate ones. It's up to you, but consider that when you're trying to comprise your build. When activating any Aedric Spear ability, you get minor protection. This is really, really simple. This is Puncturing Sweeps. That's minor protection. 5% damage mitigation just for activating your skill for 6 seconds. Now earlier I showed you a bit of a spoiler by a complete accident, and that was this actually. Explosive Charge comes with major protection. Watch. You guessed it, I got both. One comes with a skill, one comes with a passive, minor and major stack. Very important passive to get. When you deal damage with any ability, you will stack Burning Light. Now bear in mind it's Templar stuff. If you stack up multiple stacks of Burning Light, it will pop and do damage. So basically you hold it for 3 seconds. After reaching 4 stacks, applying one over and over and over, then it will go bang. And this can happen once every half a second and scales off of your highest defensive stats. So magicka or stamina, weapon or spell damage, whichever is highest, that will contribute towards this free damage just for hitting stuff. So the more aggressive you are, the faster that'll ramp up, the more often it will happen. Increases your weapon and spell damage by 6% and gives you a physical and spell resistance bonus. It's pretty simple. Increases the duration of Sunfire, Eclipse, Solar Flare, and Nova abilities by 2 seconds. Basically, this skill line, anything that has a duration, is enhanced. Get that as soon as you can. Casting a Dawn's Wrath ability generates 3 ultimate. This can happen with a cooldown of 6 seconds. So basically, if you're spamming Jesus Beam, at some point you're going to proc this passive. It's inevitable. If you're using Purifying Light, it lasts 6 seconds anyway. Keep that up and you're fine. This, once every 22 seconds, yes, there's a gap, but if you're mixing all this together, it really makes sense, and you're never going to run out of this particular passive. There's never going to be any gaps. So just make sure that you get this as soon as you can. Casting a Dawn's Wrath ability gives minor sorcery to your entire group. 20 seconds worth of 10% increase to spell damage. That is a game changer for some builds. Very helpful, and all you need to do is cast one of these skills once every 20. And reduces the health, magicka, and stamina and ultimate cost of all abilities. That includes weapon skill lines, armor skill lines, ultimates from other places. It doesn't matter where they're from, they're all cheaper. And finally, the last passive section, Restoring Light. This increases your healing effects from your Restoring Light ability, so specifically this skill line, by up to 12%, depending on how high or low the target's health is. So the lower their health, the stronger your heals. When you are standing in the area of effect of your Cleansing Ritual, Rune Focus, or Rite of Passage, we're coming up to that as an ultimate, area of effect, and up to 4 seconds after leaving them, you will gain minor mending, increasing all of your healing done for all skills, not just Templar skills, by 8%. So if you're in the circle, you get it all the time, and it will constantly refresh itself. If you leave the circles, then of course you've got 4 seconds forgiveness area where you can still benefit from the buff. If you come back in, you get it. If you stay out, you lose it. Also increases the amount of damage you can block by 10% for the duration. So again, when you're inside of it, you have block mitigation. When you leave it, you still have that for 4 seconds. When you heal an ally under 50% health with a Restoring Light ability, you give them 2 ultimate, which is really, really handy. Heals over time, big heals, whatever. If they are constantly dipping low and you give them heals back, they build ulti. That can be used quite tactically. Also, if you are using the healing ultimate, which we're coming up to shortly, you gain resistance cap. 33000. That's 50% mitigation, max resistances, job done. While you're channeling that skill, you get that. Now, technically, we've already got loads of resistances anyway, so yes, that will put us way over cap, but that's there just in case you have absolute 0. However, there are some sets in the game that can take advantage of higher resistances, so even though you won't benefit from any other mitigation outside 33k, you can stack bonuses from those sets during this time. Increases resurrection speed by 20%. We are the fastest reser in the game. Now, I can hear someone at the back going, what about Necromancer? Stuff the Necromancer. That's an ultimate. Necromancer's amazing, I know, but that's an ultimate. This is a normal res. Anyone in the game can activate a resurrection on a dead player. Templars are the fastest in the game, no contest. Resurrecting allies also return with 100% more health than they usually would, so double. And it gives you a chance to get back a soul gem. Generally, you spend a soul gem. You can get one back if you've got an empty one in your bag. Now, when it comes to weapon skills and armor skills and all that kind of stuff, we don't really need to go over that because it's not class specific. But if you mix and match these skills and class abilities, that's when you start really delving into your own build. But above all, you've got to choose which ultimates to take. Now, there are different ultimates for weapon skill lines, for guild skill lines, and all that kind of stuff, but you do come with 3 class ones as well. And they do follow suit as far as DPS, tankiness, and heals are concerned to some extent. Now, the first one is Radial Sweep, and this is in the Aedric Spear skill line. Basically, you do a wicked swing in front of you with a magical spear, and you damage all enemies around you. 8-meter radius. The duration is 6 seconds because after the initial hit, you do magic damage every 2 seconds to those targets. You should be able to activate this here. Yay! Now they have damage on them. Bear in mind, this is very cheap. 71 ultimate currently. That's not including any sets that reduce ultimate cost or race that reduces ultimate cost. So that is almost as spammable. Nearly every second rotation, if you have a 10-second rotation with Dawn's Wrath abilities involved, you can actually use that every second rotation, almost guaranteed. Now, the 2 different ones. This one deals physical damage and increases the duration, which further increases for each enemy hit. So instead of magic damage, you do physical now. You'll hit multiple targets, doing damage over time for 2 seconds every tick. So basically 5 ticks over 10 seconds, but this is extended by 2 the more targets you hit. So you could have this as a very long damage over time. Single target testing, you're not going to see much out of this. In a big crowd, you really are. This one, however, deals additional damage to enemies in front of you. And that's pretty much it. Longer duration, also extended by more targets. More damage. That's pretty much it. Enemies in your path will be hit for 60% more. So short burst damage, long duration damage, both equal in cost. Where's the other one? Dawn's Wrath. Nova. Love this. If you've ever been blinded in the game while taking a synergy, it's because you took this one. This goes on the ground. Big sunfire type ultimate. Very dramatic. We're going to show you that as well once I've got some ultimate back. Doesn't his feet sound cool? We're not going to put it on the targets because I don't want to keep running up and down the stairs and boring you. But basically this. Boom. Big sunfire on the ground. That is quite nasty. So initially it does damage when it lands and does damage over 10 seconds. However, it does have a synergy effect. First of all, Major Maim is affecting the enemies, which means they do 10% less damage. But the synergy effect does a massive bright white light to whoever picks it up and does magic damage in area of effect to all enemies around them and stuns them. This is an area of effect, burst, damage, and stun. Really handy. It's kind of a debuffing type ultimate, but it does do a decent amount of damage and your group can really benefit from it. The 2 different morphs, however. This synergy does more damage and stuns for longer. So in a situation where you just want to have more damage, this one would be more beneficial. This one, however, reduces the cost and Major Maim stays on the enemies after leaving the area. So if this is in a situation where the enemies are likely to run around in PvE, or if it's in PvP, for example, and you chuck it in the middle of a crowd and they will scatter, the debuff stays on them. This is more for utility purposes if you're in a very mobile situation, and this one is drop it on the ground, nuke everything, and make sure they can't hit very hard. They both look the same, they both act the same, but the debuff is applied slightly differently. One is based on the area, the other one is per target hit. And finally, of course, Restoring Light ulti, Rite of Passage. This is the one where if you have the passive, if you're activating it, you have cap resistances at 50% mitigation. But you will channel for 4 seconds in a 20-meter radius, and your allies will be healed once a second for 4 seconds. You cannot move while channeling, but you do gain immunity to all disabling effects, so you cannot be interrupted, stunned, knocked down, whatever. The 2 variants, Remembrance, you gain major protection after casting this, reducing your damage taken, so you get a 10-second major protection bonus, and the other one increases the duration to 8 seconds instead of 4, and allows you to move at a reduced rate. So while this does heal more, it also lasts longer and you can wiggle a bit. So the basic version or the protection version, you cannot move. Note that very carefully, you cannot move. This one, however, you can. And it looks like this. Bigger heals and wiggle. And you don't slow down by that much. You're actually almost the same speed as you would be if you were blocking. In fact, we can full out test that. You're faster than you would be if you were blocking. So, in a nutshell, those are what you have to play with. You've got 3 different skill lines, one with all spears and whizzy stuff, one with balls of fire and lights, and the other one with healy stuff. Up to you how you play and how you mix and match those, but be very careful about utilizing your passives. Remember, some things need to be slotted, some things need to be used, and yes, some things can stack while others can't. Now we're going to get into the section where I kind of give you a bit of a hint as to where you could go with some of the sets. Some of the more class identity type sets. It doesn't mean that these are necessarily the best for damage or the best for healing or tanking, but these are some options that you could consider. Now, you didn't think I was going to miss this out, did you? This is a brand new set just for the Templar in the Endless Archive. Just for the Templar. We never had class sets before that were specific. This is. Basically, when you deal damage with your Dawn's Wrath abilities, you gain a Sunlight stack for 10 seconds per attack, which can repeat and overlap itself and constantly restart the timer. After you've got 40 stacks, you will actually burst and drop a Nova on the enemy. That acts effectively like the same Nova you have in your ultimate. But while you're building up stacks, every stack you build before the burst, you will gain 12 Magicka recovery. So 40 times 12 recovery. Take advantage of the Jesus Beam that gives you a heal and the recovery, and you basically can't run out and you have constant Novas being fired every time you get to 40 stacks. Which, by the way, is quite easy to do considering you have 3 or 4 ticks every 2 seconds. And when the Sunlight expires at maximum stacks, you lose 50% of your current Magicka. So bear in mind, you build it, fire, but then your Magicka goes down by half. There is one more massive bonus to this, however. When the Nova fires, for the next 10 seconds, you will actually do 25% bonus damage with all of your Dawn's Wrath abilities. So if you are using this and you're at execute right now, and it's a long execute, and you're basically just spamming Jesus Beam, you will build and build and build and fire, do extra damage for 10 seconds, build and build and build and fire. It is phenomenal in the right situations. And yes, you can still use your regular Nova on top of this. So you can stagger your ultimate with your set. Quite bonkers, and only for the Templar. So while I was going to give you some options as far as class identity is concerned, this is actually just for them. Now, other sets that you might like, there are some overland sets which are quite fun. So you've got the Oldbury Dominion, obviously, Reaper's March, and you've got Soulshine. Now, technically speaking, not to say there aren't other stronger sets out there, but if you're quite new to the game, activate an ability with a cast or channel time grants you weapon and spell damage for 5 seconds. So all you need to do is use Puncturing Sweeps or a Jesus Beam. That is basically built for you. Really easy to apply. Then, if you go to PvP, if you like that stuff, or just buy it off the market, you've got a Cyrodiil set, which you may be familiar with, known as Deadly. So the Deadly Strike set actually increases damage over time. If I can find D, where is the D? This increases all damage over time or channeled effects by 15%, which means your Puncturing Sweeps and your Jesus Beam and all of your other damage over time, including your Spear that goes on the ground, your Vampire's Bane, all that stuff, and even your Solar Flare, all count as either channeled or damage over time. So basically, almost everything that you do as this class will be enhanced by this set. Again, we've gone over 2 damage sets or skill kind of sets, but we're going to go into other stuff, don't worry. Now, as far as tanky stuff is concerned, this is where it gets really fun, because you can start messing with things that really do feel a little different playstyle wise. There's a set in the Maelstrom Arena. You can go for the vet version or the normal version. Doesn't make a difference really, because it drops either way. And it is called, where have you gone? Glorious Defender. Now the Templar is really good at turtling up, kind of staying in the spot and being really, really chunky and taking heals over time and not really being able to be killed. They're quite strong when you tank them up. But when you bash an enemy, you gain glorious defense for 10 whole seconds, allowing you to dodge the next attack made to you and all others afterwards for 1 second. And this can happen once every 13. While this may be very situational, it's actually quite funny bashing a boss as he's doing a heavy attack, and then your next swing that you receive does absolutely nothing. So you don't have to block the big stuff. You can just bash him just while he's swinging and then not be hit by it. Very, very powerful, and it makes you feel almost like a bit of a shadow. It just goes straight through you. Now, alongside this set for a tank, I've actually messed with this before in a video, and here's the video link there. This was to kind of give you some encouragement as to where you could and couldn't go with certain things. So when it comes to overland stuff, yet again, base game, if I can find it in miscellaneous, not Craglorn, Cold Harbor, you've got this. Meridia's Blessed Armor, which is very Templar-like, obviously. Meridian and lights and yellow stuff obviously fits a Templar. It's a tanky set, and when you block, you gain Blessed Armor for 5 seconds. Long cooldown, but for 5 seconds, you dodge every single attack. So one set, when you've got a big heavy attack coming in, bash the target, next hit misses you. And then this one, when you do block, everything for the next 5 seconds misses you. You can't be hit. So there's some fun there to kind of make you feel like literally a light in the middle of the room that cannot actually take any damage, at the same time as being really, really tanky when you can. Healy stuff, we're going to go generic as hell with this one. DLC zones or DLC dungeons. White Gold Tower, here we come. Spell Power Cure. When you overheal yourself or an ally, you give the target major courage, increasing their damage. What else do you want? If you're an effective healer and you are keeping people's health bars up and you overheal them, like I mentioned earlier, some things require overheal, spell power all day long. You buff the group for healing them. You can't really get better than that. Yes, of course, there's lots of sets in the game. You can do what the hell you want, but for doing your job, they get buffed. There are so many other sets in the game that you could take advantage of. There are over 600. We could be here for a very, very long time, but there are options. Let's just say that those are some of the fun ones. And before we go, Elden Hollow 2, Bogdan. Healing people, puts a healing totem on the ground, heals them some more. If you want some builds for Templars, there are plenty of them on the channel, but hopefully that helped you with the class identity itself, understanding its aesthetics, understanding how it works, and understanding its passives and skills and where you can go with them. If you look on the left-hand side here, you will see that there is a build video called Off Balance. That is a DPS build. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a lazy tank. And if you look at the bottom there, you'll see there's the cleric, which is a heavy armor healer. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to sub, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.